Okay, good morning everyone and welcome to today's webinar for HSST supervisors, in which we're going to introduce you to some of the key features of OneFile. Let's dive straight into OneFile to have a little bit of orientation about how it's set up for you as an HSST supervisor. So let's go to OneFile. Here we are. This is the OneFile homepage as seen by an HSST supervisor. And straight away there's a couple of key features I want to bring to your attention. The first view are at the very top right hand corner of the screen, where we can see beside the envelope icon messages. Messages could be feedback or commentary or notifications from trainees. Tasks beside the little clipboard icon. Tasks are things you have to do when, for example, something has been submitted to you. For example, a submission from a trainee in which they're asking for feedback and potentially sign off of the evidence that they're submitting to you about some of their workplace-based activity. And also we have the individual profile, and let's just begin with the individual profile. If we click on our name here and click on profile, a key feature I want to draw to your attention is the email preferences tab that sits within the profile area. And what this, the key point I want to make about this is that you are not automatically signed up to receive email alerts. You have to sign up for them. So here we are on the email preferences page, and a couple of things to draw to your attention. One is that we can have multiple email addresses if we really wanted to have them, at which we can be notified. And if we just scroll down the page here to the email alerts section, we can see that we can sign up for ad hoc alerts. In other words, anytime something happens for us, or anytime something is submitted to me, send me an alert about it. And if we don't choose ad hoc alerts, we can alternatively choose digests. We can have both if we wanted. We can have a digest sent to us and choose the day that it is sent. And a digest is a summary, a collecting together of all of the alerts, tasks, messages that are pushed to you in OneFile. So these tasks and these messages do sit within the system underneath the tasks little icon at the top right and underneath the messages icon. But if you haven't signed up for email alerts, then these tasks and messages are only sitting in OneFile, and you're not receiving them, you're not being notified of tasks that you are being asked to do. So those are some key kind of fundamental areas of OneFile that we need to get to grips with straight away. And the kind of key takeaway point here is please sign up for email alerts, because your trainees could very well be submitting evidence of activity for you to review and feedback upon, and you may not know about it unless you're looking into OneFile and looking at your tasks and messages if you're not signed up for email alerts. Let's just scroll down the page and see some of the features we have here. We've got an overview of when trainees last logged in, if we really want it. If we have more than one trainee, we can see who's using OneFile more or less frequently than the other. But I think the key part of the homepage where there's lots of quick access to important information for supervisors is within this Trainee Dashboard. And in this hypothetical case that I'm looking at here, I have one HSST trainee. And let's have a quick look at what we can find out from the homepage about how this trainee is doing. And the key thing I want to look at is the trainee's progress. So we've got two routes into the trainee's progress here. We've got this progress bar, which tells us, in this case, that the trainee has already covered 54% of everything that they could potentially map evidence against. And we'll look at what that means in a couple of minutes. I'm going to actually choose, though, to take the gap analysis view of progress, because I think this gives us a very useful one-page view of everything the trainee could be doing and everything they have done. So if I click on gap analysis, and if I just leave everything as it is, but click on Show All and Apply, what I then get is a one-page view of everything the trainee has done. What I'm going to do is actually just collapse everything that's in this page first of all to give you a sense of the structure of the portfolio for the trainee. And what you can see in front of you here is the fact that we have set up the 5 domains of the Higher Specialist Scientist Standards of Proficiency as the structure against which evidence of activity, evidence of the training activity in the workplace can be mapped. If I just expand one of them, in this case, let's take the professional practice domain, and if I scroll down here, we can see the 1, 2, 3, 4 standards that make up this particular domain. And under each of these standards, let's just focus on standard 2, for example, we can see that this particular trainee has made a number of submissions within the e-portfolio, and they have had against standard 2.1, 2.2 and 2.3, these with the green boxes to the right there, these have been looked at, assessed, fed back upon and approved. So as far as the system is concerned, this trainee has met that standard, hence the green box, whereas standards 2.4 and 2.5 are still to be covered. And that's true. That's the kind of view that you get in this gap analysis page of every single one of these kind of module-like structures that we've set up in the e-portfolio. So in fact, if I just now expand them all, what we get is a one-page view of everything the trainee has done. And let's look at this very first unit or module-like structure here, because in addition to the standards of proficiency, we've created what OneFile calls a unit just entitled Training Planning. And the point of this is to provide the trainee with a series of hooks onto which they are expected to hang evidence of ongoing training planning. And this is not a requirement to do a set number of training plans. The expectation here is that every time a training plan is reviewed and revised, it is submitted in OneFile for you as the supervisor to indicate your approval of. So if we just have a look at what's happened here with this particular trainee, we can see that they have a green box here against the very first training plan that they have submitted, and they've had it signed off. And then actually, as you can see if we scroll down the page, on a further 10 occasions, this trainee has submitted revised training plans, each of which, with the green boxes beside them, have been reviewed and signed off by their supervisor. We can see one training plan here, and we'll look at this shortly, which has the amber box beside it. That indicates it's been submitted, but it hasn't been reviewed. And then we've got a range of other kind of hooks where the trainee can submit additional future training plans. And there's no limit to the number they can, in fact, submit. You can see that there are 30 possible hooks there, but actually you could submit more than one against each hook, so you can go back and submit training plans, further training plans against any of these particular lines here. So some key points we've encountered just by looking at this particular one-page view of progress. We can see that there's that unit there dedicated or devoted to recording and evidencing and approving training plans. And then we have all of the 16 standards of proficiency organized under the particular domains of the HSS standards of proficiency. And if I scroll down this page here, we can see a mixed bag for this particular hypothetical trainee, where some of the standards, like this standard 5 that we can see here, they have already, in this case, covered each of these standards, whereas there are some, like standard 6, where there's nothing yet signed off. There's something submitted yet to be looked at, and several many standards where things haven't yet been submitted. And this gap analysis view, if I just scroll back up to the very top of the page, is maybe something that comes really into its own as we progress further into the program, because we could, rather than looking at everything, we can apply some filters, for example, not completed, and hit apply, and then that will just give us a view of those standards. Let's just collapse the training planning one. That gives us a view of all of those particular standards where the trainee hasn't necessarily uploaded evidence for review and approval. So that's the gap analysis view of the trainee's progress, visible, accessible to you, one click away from the home page. And where was that again, just to recap? That was down in this Trainee Dashboard on your home page. And if you click on gap analysis, you get that view of progress. Were you to click on this green progress bar in the middle of the page here, you get a similar overview of progress. This time a kind of high-level view on a domain-by-domain basis of the extent of coverage of each of those structures within the ePortfolio. And in fact, we can drill down into these. Were we to drill down into Domain 3, Clinical Practice, we could see the two standards there, one of which the trainee has fully covered, one of which, Standard 9, they've covered 2/3 of, and we could even click in that progress bar, and let's just wait for that to come through. And then we end up at a view very similar to the gap analysis view of how they have covered that particular standard. So back to the home page, and just to recap that point that we are only one click away from some useful overviews of trainee progress and activity via this trainee dashboard on the home page. There are other features accessible via that dashboard. Those are the only ones we're going to look at right now, just those overviews of progress. So that's how you can, if you like, prospectively log into OneFile and get that overview of what the trainee is doing, what's pending, what has been covered, what hasn't been submitted for review and feedback. But let's now move on to our role as somebody reactively operating in OneFile. In other words, we've been set a task, we've been asked to respond to something that the trainee has submitted within the system. So where will I find out what my tasks are? I'll go to the task icon at the top right of the page here. I'll just click on that, and we can see two tasks that I have been set by the system because my trainee has, as we can see here, please sign submission, revised training plan. So the trainee has created a submission, which is clearly a training plan that we're being asked to look at. Please sign submission is OneFile speak for review and feedback and potentially sign off. So there's a training plan submission, and there's another submission. The trainee is entitled Clinical Validation Project Review, another piece of evidence the trainee has submitted for us to review and feedback upon. So let's have a look at both of those in turn. Now the first of these is the training plan, and this should really be a formality because the training plan is highly likely to be something that you and your trainee have already had a discussion about. So from a OneFile point of view, this is the trainee simply uploading it for you to say that you approve of this negotiated plan. But let's click on that task, and it takes us to the submission. And as we can see here, the trainee has given the submission a title, which is Revised Training Plan, November to December 18. They have mapped the submission against one of those training plan elements that we saw in the progress view. And then what have they done? They've provided a little bit of narrative, which just simply says here, please find attached a copy of my revised training plan as discussed with you. Please review and sign off. And they've attached a document there which contains the training plan. So if it's a formality to sign off this submission, let's just quickly focus on how do we respond to submissions in OneFile. And before we do that, I want to draw to your attention that in addition to what we're about to show you here, there's lots of guidance about everything you need to do in OneFile on the school website and via also our YouTube channel. So if I just take a second to look at the school website, you can see here we are on the school website. There's a menu item in the top menu bar called OneFile. If we click on that OneFile item, we can see this section containing a range of guidance about OneFile. This contains, for example, videos to help with key tasks, with links to YouTube playlists where we collect together various short videos for particular roles, and you can see there's one for HSST supervisors. Were I to click on that link, I would arrive here, and a range, as you can see, of short videos about using the ePortfolio in HSST, one of which is, as you can see at the bottom of the page, how to respond to submissions in OneFile, just a short, less than 2-minute video. We also, in that section, have a page or a section called Guidance for Supervisors and Assessors, which contains within it this useful, simple one-page document about how to respond to a submission in OneFile, which is what we're just about to do with this particular trainee's training plan. And what we can see here is a very quick summary of the 3 options we have whenever we have a submission in OneFile. We can approve it, which is effectively pass. We can reject it, which is effectively fail. Or we can ask the trainee to do some more work, which is simply to resubmit, send back for further activity. So if we want to approve it, as we can see here, we have to do 2 things before we then click Save and Quit. We have to tick the particular competency or standard that the trainee is mapping this against. We have to sign the declaration, then we click Save and Quit. So let's do that currently for this particular submission. So what we have to do is we have to tick what they're mapping this submission against. We would probably want to provide some feedback. I'll just quickly type in here. We don't have to make that extensive right now. We could add further documents. We can add attachments to our feedback. But crucially, we have to tick at the bottom in the signature space at the foot of the page, and then we hit Save and Quit. And what that has done, it has removed a task from our task list. We're now down to 1 task, and that particular item will then turn green in the trainee's portfolio. Let's now go to the second task and focus on a couple of related issues about how to respond to submissions in OneFile. Let's click on that task. Right, let's see what we've got here. This is a submission the trainee titled Clinical Validation Project Review, October 18. And what the trainee has done here is they've identified which of the particular standards they're mapping this submission against. And in this case, it's standard 6.1 from the set of standards under the heading Direct Scientific Validation and Evaluation. And that's the particular standard they're mapping this body of evidence against. And then let's see what the trainee has done. Well, in their overarching narrative, they have said, please find a copy of the review I conducted in evaluation of our recent clinical validation project. Crucially, the trainee has done something else here. They have also said, this activity also maps to the following elements of the laboratory aspects of genetics module. And the reason we've brought this to your attention is to say that we're encouraging trainees, as part of the narrative that they provide when they map evidence of activity against the standards of proficiency, we are also encouraging trainees to reference in their narrative whether there are aspects of their particular specialism's curriculum that this particular submission maps against. We haven't set up the HSST specialist curricula in the ePortfolio because the specialist curricula doesn't contain standardized sets of competencies that trainees are required to cover. So we have to be a little bit more qualitative on this side and ask for the trainee to indicate to you also where this activity maps to parts of their curriculum. So the trainees provided us with a little bit of narrative about that. They have submitted some documentation for us to review, and therefore it's our job to decide what we want to do with this. And I'm just going to go back to that piece of that one-page kind of piece of guidance about what we can do when we receive a submission in OneFile. So those three options, and there's a couple of points I want to make here. The first point is a kind of technical point about how it might be easy to confuse approving and rejecting. Because as you can see from the options here, if you don't tick the competency and then sign the declaration, that is you indicating that you reject. Whereas if you do tick the competency and sign, that is you indicating that you approve. In other words, that it's signed off. The standard turns green. So looking back at the trainee's submission, it might actually be, it's an easy mistake to make perhaps, to forget to tick the standard here and simply then to sign at the foot of the page before hitting save and quit. So that's the first point, kind of technical point I want to make about your submission options. But perhaps the more important point is to draw your attention to the third option you have, which is the resubmit option. Because one of the things we're learning from trainees and from HSST training officers is that this is a feature in OneFile they're finding particularly valuable. Because some trainees and some supervisors are coming in to us to say, well, my trainee has provided some evidence, or the trainee is saying, I've got this evidence and I feel like it maps against this standard, but it's quite a broad standard, and this might be something I'm going to cover in the fullness of time and not necessarily with one body of activity or evidence right now. And for those situations, or for those particular standards where you as the supervisor or even the trainee are simply feeling that what's appropriate at this stage is a feedback conversation about the evidence rather than jumping to the yes, no, approve, reject decision, the resubmit option is a very sensible option to choose. If for this particular standard you think this is something that might need to be built up more over time rather than it's something that you think has been fully matched and met right now that you are going to approve. So why don't we now take that option for this particular submission? I'll just pick up some text there. Because if I'm going to hit resubmit, actually the system won't allow me to resubmit unless I've provided feedback. So let's, for the sake of argument, assume that my feedback is nicely detailed here. I'm telling the trainee what I like about this piece of work and what else I think they might like to do in order to perhaps fully meet the standard. And if that is what I want to do, I don't have to be ticking any boxes at all. I simply provide feedback and click resubmit as we indicated in the little graphic there. So if I was to approve it, I would be ticking the particular standard at the top of the page and I would be signing at the foot of the page. If I was to reject it, I would be leaving the standard unticked and I would sign. But if I'm resubmitting, all I simply need to do, and when I say resubmitting, I'm asking the trainee to go to do some more work, I simply need to hit resubmit. And actually OneFile is a useful place for this kind of feedback thread to continue, because the trainee might then come back to us with some comment on our own feedback, and all of that will be contained within this page so that we can see how things have built up over time. So I'm therefore going to hit the resubmit button. The system says, are you sure you want to send this back to the trainee? Just in case we were doing that by accident, just double checking with us. And there we are. I have no tasks to complete and I have sent that particular submission back to the trainee to reconsider. And if I was now to go back to my home page, What difference will have happened in the trainees' portfolio? I guess the one thing that has turned green here is their, excuse me, I've clicked on that accidentally. The one thing that has turned green here is that the trainee has another signed off training plan, which in this case was the, click in here, was their, this line here. The 11th time they've submitted a revised training plan, now turned green because we signed it off, whereas the submission that we are sending back to the trainee will be sitting as pending, back in a kind of draft state, so it will be amber in the trainee's progress view. So that is really all that we wanted to concentrate on today. I'm going to jump back into the presentation for some takeaway comments. Let's just load this up. So some key points to take away from the webinar. First off, sign up for email alerts. You're not going to be notified of something waiting for your feedback if you haven't signed up for email alerts. Second of all, and really fundamental to the way we have set up OneFile for HSST trainees, it's evidence of training planning and it's mapping evidence to the standards of proficiency, which is these are the central pillars against which we're asking trainees, expecting trainees to map and submit their evidence. Useful if you watch the how-to videos. Some of the other features we haven't looked at today, for example, how to conduct review meetings or even other aspects of OneFile covered in that series of how-to videos, which you can find via the school website in the OneFile section. And lastly, the point we kind of finished on when we were looking at the resubmission function there, the point that we're advising trainees to learn how to build up a submission and, if it's appropriate, to invite their supervisor to review and return it. In many cases, they'll be asking you to sign it off because they've got really solid evidence of coverage of maybe more than one even standard with one piece of evidence. But it is important that you know that we're advising trainees also to explore with you that kind of resubmission iterative feedback conversation cycle as one way of using OneFile. So those are key points we want you to take away from today's webinar. If you have any further questions, please send them to us at the National Schools dedicated help desk for OneFile, which is at the address you can see in front of you there. But that's all we wanted to cover today, folks. So thanks ever so much for your time. Thanks for attending, and very good luck with using OneFile as an HSST supervisor. Thank you.